I'm saying that one of the things I discovered in my own search in the quiet are the deep things that I've often missed about suffering and my role in suffering and repair. And I'm using those terms for this moment, but how do we begin healing? Quest for social justice absolutely is part of that, but also compassion. Compassion in the Dalai Lama's language means literally, I cannot bear the sight of your suffering. So I'm learning that. I'm learning that I'm not just in the flow of the stream of all things that are created. I'm a very minuscule part of this, but I'm also accountable for suffering in the world. And I notice a lot of this comes from my early childhood. I was born in Mississippi. I always tell people that I was raised in Illinois. So I have Mississippi in me, but I also have Chicago. I have both. And it's a great combination. I kind of like it. But my daddy left Mississippi in a hurry. I've written about that. And we grew up on the south side of Chicago, and I kind of know what poverty means.
Yeah.
I know what violence looks like on the ground.
Yeah.
And I also have a deep, deep appreciation for what it did to my family. I used to watch my father. He knew something about this, what we're calling quiet. He was a very funny man too. He told stories, you laughed, but he was also what I call peace by the waterfall. He would sit in silence sometimes, and I'd see him with a far away look. He was just finding this place out of which he would move and negotiate the traffic of the day. Mm-hmm. Peace by the waterfall. Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to achieve, to make a very long, meandering speech.
Mm-hmm. It was nice to journey with you through.
Mm-hmm.
It was good.
Yeah, I try to achieve this peace by the waterfall. If you can imagine someone sitting at Niagara Falls, and there's a little alcove carved out in the rock underneath the waterfall. I'm peace. And my best days, when I'm most myself, I'm peace by the waterfall.
Mm. For people that struggle to sit with themselves, to sit in silence. Earlier you said that sometimes the suffering is in the noise, but for some people, when you get quiet, you realize and you have time to sit with suffering internally and externally. So how would you help someone who's listening who maybe wants to find that silent place, but they struggle to center down, to sit quietly?
Well, since we're talking about Thurman, but I think it's true for most people in contemplative practice, we use language like detachment, or I mentioned abandonment, and Thurman uses various terms for it. But part of it is to allow the mind to do its thing. Mm. It can only talk and go places, images. And one of the hardest lessons ever in meditation or in practicing quiet, because meditation sometimes throws it off. It's like a duty. Yeah, I'm not, but to sit with all of the different dances of the mind and let the thoughts find their own place and let them leave as they please. So that requires patience. And yes, practice. I practice meditation like that when I'm writing, because my mind is overactive. I mean, it's like burnout. The thoughts collide at intersections. They're just everywhere. But to be still long enough to let them do I always say, let them do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, memories of all of the hurts, all of the joys, all of the mean things you've said to people that you feel badly about, and the mean things people have said to you that hurt you deeply. Let it go, people. Because it doesn't matter on this journey. Now, it might matter in some other place, but on this journey that I'm talking about, all of that is just stuff that gets in the way, because what you want is a place where you show up in another space, so to speak. But it was the space you were in all along, and you didn't know it. And I just say I have a bunch of examples, but I'll share one or two. I remember when I was in the military in Germany, we were in this little town called Grafenwehr. They'd have these huge military exercises there. And I was a chaplain's assistant. I had a good job. I stayed, I didn't even bivouac with the rest of the soldiers. There was a little chapel on the side. Other assistants and we just hung out in the chapel, sleep there. But one night I was alone walking down a lonely road in Germany. I was about 19 or 20 years old. It's hard to believe I was ever 19 or 20, but I was walking down the road and all at once I was struck by the quietness that we're talking about. And it wasn't, I did not solicit it. So one of the things I want to say is that the quietness is independent. I sometimes think it doesn't even know you in some ways. Mm-hmm. We love to make it personal, but it just showed up. And I felt such relief and joy. I think I yearn for that again. Quietness. There have been other instances, though, when I've gone into meditation. Here's a great example for me. Mm-hmm. I told you my mind is like, you have no idea. I bet you your mind is like that too, right? You know, it just goes places. Yeah. So I was working through an image that I would receive whenever I went into contemplation in my study or elsewhere. So one evening, after a lot of attempts, I go to my study. I'm in Rochester, New York then. Mm-hmm. And I take all my breathing, deep breath, exhale, all that stuff. But it would always show up with me like in a thicket. Mm-hmm. Since we're down south, everybody knows what that word means. You're in a thicket. It's a very deep, dense forest or weeds everywhere. And I would see myself as if I were with a machete cutting through. I couldn't get through. And my feet were in great pain. It was like the rocks were so hard at the bottom of my feet. I was hurting myself just moving. And this was an experience I'd have over and over. Wow. I talked with a few therapists about it, so I'm good, but it was deep over and over. But one evening, man, it was like myself, I like to say lowercase my, uppercase self. Myself looked at myself down in the thicket, like an aerial view, and said to myself, behold, I am not that. It was so freeing. I had spent this image had stayed with me most of my adult life up until that moment. And I'm sure it had to do with how hard it was trying to make stuff work and always running into challenges and provocations and, oh Lord, fights and trying to make stuff work with other human beings. Yeah. They always get in the way and all of this stuff. But that evening, when I myself said to myself, behold, I am not that.
I'm so curious, what caused that?
What caused what?
Yeah, like that moment where you were able
I
to.
have no idea. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
So quietness, the
Mm-hmm.
quiet that we're talking about, is not dependent on you, yet you practice it. Is that paradoxical? Like, yes, it is. It's paradoxical. But is and some of us in Christian traditions, we just call it grace. And you got all of these great examples in the Bible. Paul goes up to the whatever heaven he found, and and he gets this message that's in Second Corinthians. I used to know the Bible. I used to really know the Bible very well. But and he comes back and he says, "My grace is sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
My strength is made." But this is like it operates on. It has its own will.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about presence that we encounter, Thurman calls it the creative encounter. Sometimes he refers to presence as the principle with PAL at the end, is a tutor. You're engaged in a tutorial that is always, he thinks, transforming the inner, also propels you into society, into the outer. So the inner and outer are very important for Thurman. And you're always going in to come out. But the presence, when I encounter this presence, which shows up, blesses us, but then we're working with the practice of the inner life. Our innermost being is being constantly transformed as part of our outward gaze and action in the world. I'm always in a place where I'm pushed into society as an agent of change, transformation, because I cannot have this experience in integrity and enjoy it unless I'm working on the same stuff outside of me. That's kind of simple way to say it.
Yeah.
But for Thurman, this shows up in all kind of ways. His work, I remember my first encounter with the correspondence between King and Thurman. Uh, he's basically saying to the young Martin Luther King Jr. in 1958, after he was stabbed, that you've got to deepen your channels because this movement of which you are part, and a lot of scholars are quoting that now, and I'm glad they're quoting it. But here's Thurman's point. This movement of which you are part has become like an organism, and is only going to spread and grow. And unless you deepen your channels, this movement will swallow you up. And it's no accident to me, and we can wrap it up if you like. Mm-hmm. It's no accident to me. This is in 1958. King takes a convalescence that is longer than the doctors had required. Thurman asked him to extend it, and he reads and he meditates for the first time in his adult life. And the next February, he's in India. And always strikes me as maybe not just coincidental that Thurman had been to India in 1936 and met with Mahatma Gandhi, and King, who is listening to this wise counsel, ends up in India and comes back as a devotee of nonviolent resistance. So you're constantly being, I don't know how to say it better. You go in to get out.
Dr. Fluker, thank you so much for all of your insights and everything that you've shared. So for someone listening who now really wants to engage with Howard Thurman, they want to go listen to the online archives, what would you suggest are 3 tips that they can take to get the most out of that experience?
Please read Thurman and read him. Stay with him. His autobiography is a great place to begin. Most people recommend Jesus and the Disinherited. I rather recommend Disciplines of the Spirit. Those are good places to begin. The second thing is the best instrument for getting to know Howard Thurman is the human ear.
Mm.
Listen to him. Listen to the melody of his voice, the deep resonance, and listen also to his heart. He calls it the quiet heart, but his heart is also reaching for yours. In those sermons and those meditations, he shares his experience as a way to become part of yours.
We have learned so much today. I personally have never thought of silence as something that you don't own, something that the quiet is moving. We were talking a bit off camera. I'll say this here too because it's so good. You said the quiet doesn't even know that you exist. The quiet, the quiet is actively moving. And as you said it, I started just laughing a little bit, thinking about meditations and things
The
that I'm
human ego is so
Yes,
deep.
the human ego is so deep. And in this moment on this podcast, I'm going to own I've fallen victim to it as well. So I hope that we can
All of
release.
us. Yeah,
Yeah.
we think we can turn a better way to say it theologically. We can turn God on and off. Say, okay, God, let me pray. And so you should know Thurman wasn't big on petitionary prayer.
Mm.
It was not something he recommended. In fact, he did it one time. He notes it in his journal in Africa. He's having a very difficult time. He said, I actually asked God. That's not something he did. He didn't petition God
Yeah.
because he wasn't sure that you can make those kind of demands
Mm.
on God. It's not a negotiation. It's not a transaction with them.
Yeah.
It's being present with what is already here.
Wow.
And it's always here. This is Thurman. You might find your own way into it, but it has worked for me, I'm telling
Yeah. Dr. Fluker, it has been a joy to have this conversation with you today. Thank you for your authenticity. Thank you for the ways that you've opened us up to
you.
Thurman. And I hope that everyone takes the opportunity to go deeper and to center down and spend time with the quiet, who's already doing its own thing.
Thank you, and stay in the light.
That's my favorite thing that you say. All right. Thank you, Dr. Fluker.
All right. Bye-bye.
Walter Earl Fluker and Associates is delighted to announce that their digital version of the 5-volume documentary edition, The Papers of Howard Thurman, is now available and accessible to the public at thurmanpapersproject.org.